Hello, my name is John, and with my wife Angie, we run the JandA Travels channel. We are full-time RVers living in an Axiom Imperium 3800 RPMS. That's the one with the fancy deck on the side and the patio on the back. As we moved away from our sticks and bricks house, we had to make a decision on how we were going to live, receive mail, pay taxes if necessary, register to vote, have our vehicles titled, registered, and insured, and that is choosing a domicile state. And in this video, I'd like to go through some research that I undertook to try and help us make this decision. So I've put together this video containing the information that I have found, and hopefully it will help others in their decision on where to domicile. So when choosing a state to domicile out of as a full-time RVer, we really only have about three choices: Texas, Florida, and South Dakota. Each one of these offers some level of mail forwarding service that their laws and rules will treat as an address, much like a sticks and bricks physical address where you started from. They also make it a little easier for folks to do things like register their vehicles or register to vote. These are important things that, as we go through this presentation, we need to consider for each individual person, because needs and desires are going to vary. So what is domicile anyway? Domicile is really the rules and laws that allow you to say that you are officially a resident from a state. It is a permanent legal home, and that's where your records are kept. Versus a residence, that's just where you're living today. My residence right now is in an RV park in Oregon State, but I don't domicile in Oregon. Really, I mean, the difference is just where you live right now versus where you are home basing out of. And that is for all of the legal purposes: registering to vote, titling and insuring your vehicles, etc. So ultimately, we can domicile in any state in the union. However, as full-time RVers without a permanent sticks and bricks home, it's really just the three states we mentioned earlier. And ultimately, to qualify as a full-time RVer domicile state, we really need to be able to do some basic things, such as have a driver's license issued, which normally means that we have to have some sort of mail forwarding service that the state and even county will accept. We need to be able to register vehicles. We need to be able to insure vehicles, and we must be able to register to vote. And ultimately, the state must not require a physical dwelling or a utility bill or other things that are very difficult to establish when you're living out of an RV. Ultimately, these are personal questions. I'm hoping to give you some facts from each state that will help you make an informed decision. So let's talk a little bit about costs that we can expect from these three different states. And among some of the most important are insurance rates. Starting off with the state of Texas, we see that it lands kind of in the middle of our three target states. And some of the reasons are it has a very high truck population density. It's rather favorable to RVers with their laws and underwriting. In Florida, we have a bunch of cons that kind of drop it to the bottom of the three for costs, and that's sort of a higher fraud rate, higher uninsured motorist rates, and of course, every year we have storms that come through that can cause some significant damage. So this ends up bringing Florida to the most expensive, not the best for insurance. And finally, with very favorable underwriting laws and a very low population density and a very low claim rate, South Dakota gives the most favorable for insurance rates of our three target states. And as we move on to the RV insurance, we find that very similar reasons for very similar price rankings. We have Texas coming in the middle, a lot of the same reasons: a very high RV population, Florida, we have again a lot of insurance claims from either fraud or because of the coastal storm issues. And finally, South Dakota, we see that the rates again are the lowest of all three of the states for a lot of the same reasons: good underwriting, low claim rate, low population density. I want to remark on these last two slides. These numbers are generated as an average from multiple AI sources and research. It does not mean you should expect to find a rate in the range as I've shown. These are examples only. Rates are going to be a lot of risk calculation, personal driving record. Unfortunately, age does come into play both at the low and high age ranges. These are things that you'll just have to shop around for. We chose to work through Roamly, which is a very favorable company. They are not a paid sponsor. I just like Roamly. Now, if you started off in your different home state and you've decided to move to Florida, Texas, or South Dakota, one of the things you'll need to do is register your vehicle. And here we have, cost-wise, a clear winner with Texas. A recent law in Texas allowed for a $90 one-time transfer fee to register your vehicle. Now, there's some other fees as well, and you're going to end up paying probably in the range of $200 to $300, right around there, to register your vehicle in Texas. Florida provides a tax credit based upon how much you spent to register your vehicle in taxes in your originating state. I'm not going to get into the deep calculations there. I have given the Florida statute that does draw up how this calculation works. Depending upon how much you spent in the other state versus how much Florida charges, you may end up paying very little, or you may end up paying quite a bit. Same goes for South Dakota. They give credit for the amount of tax you paid on your vehicle in your originating state. Of course, going back to Texas real quick, if you move to Texas and then you buy a truck in Texas, you're going to pay the largest amount of tax. So keep that in mind if you do choose Texas. Now, when we start looking at the costs by state, once you've established your domicile there, we see a continuing pattern of South Dakota being the least expensive, Florida being the most expensive, and Texas sitting right in the middle. I want to again remark that the one-time use tax or the registration tax that you'll pay when moving to a state is going to vary widely based upon how much you spent on taxes for your truck and your camper in your originating state. Texas, again, will give you that $90 transfer fee one time up front. It leads the pack there, but we still have to maintain and pay taxes, registrations, insurance throughout the year. So keep that in mind, that while you may pay upfront a little bit more in one place or another, there may be other things that are very attractive to you that the state offers that the other two do not. When it comes to registering to vote, we have the ability to register as full-time RVers in each one of these states. We do need to use a residential style address such as Escapees or America's Mailbox. Texas does seem to be the most stable from the registering to vote as a new Texan. Florida, it's a little sticky, but as long as you have a residential style PMB, you shouldn't have any issues. And finally, in South Dakota, you will be able to register to vote, but we're going to talk a little bit more about South Dakota specifically in a few slides to come, and some of the things that you will experience if you do choose South Dakota as your domicile state. How do you register in Texas if you decide that Texas is the state for you? I put together a little checklist, and I'm not going to go over the minutia for each of these. I'm just going to hit the highlights and the specific order as suggested by many people who've gone before me into the great state of Texas, and how you get this done the correct way to give yourself the least amount of headache and the best chance of success as far as one and done. And the first thing that you need to do is set up your mail forwarding address. Escapees makes it very easy out of Polk County and the city of Livingston, Texas, where they make their headquarters. Right next door to their headquarters and mail forwarding service office is an Escapees park where you can park your camper for a reasonable rate comparatively while you are spending time in the state getting all of your documentation kept up. Once you have established your mail service, which you do not need to be in Texas to do, when you arrive, be sure to establish your RV and automobile insurance before then registering for your vehicle and RV with the tax office. And then once you have all of your documentation and receipts in hand, head to the Department of Public Safety to get your driver's license. And finally, then you will be able to register to vote. And much like Texas, Florida has the same order of operations. Establish your mailing address, get your insurance in order, register, title your vehicles, get your driver's license, and register to vote. One thing that Florida does pay a little bit more attention to are some strict timelines. Once you begin this process, you want to make sure that you complete it, which shouldn't be a problem if you dedicate just a couple of days to doing the work, but you don't want to dally with your time. Texas gives you some freebies when it comes to their time limits. They're going to be a little bit more lax. Florida is going to give you a little bit more of a hard time, so pay attention and be mindful to those timelines, meet them, and you should experience no issues. And finally, with South Dakota, they do have one little extra step that they ask you to complete. Again, first, always start off with setting up your mail forwarding service address. Then, to start the process, you must travel to South Dakota and stay at least one night, overnight. Keep your receipt, you're going to need it, because then after you've set up your appointment to go to the DMV, bring your receipt that proves you have spent at least one night, and you will be issued your driver's license. Once you have your driver's license, you can then proceed to register your vehicles, bring all of your appropriate documentation with you. Once that is done, immediately update your insurance to a carrier that is bound to South Dakota, and finally, then you can register to vote. And finally, I had mentioned earlier that there are some special considerations for the state of South Dakota. In 2023, SB 139 redefined, it did not create new laws, it redefined existing laws on the books that talk about how people live or do not live in South Dakota. And the two follow-up ramifications for people who wish to domicile in South Dakota are as follows. Number one, if you wish to register to vote in South Dakota, then you will need to stay at least 30 days consecutively in South Dakota annually, or you will not be able to vote. Makes sense for local elections, but it can be a little tight for national elections. If you don't live there permanently, why would you vote in a local election? Leave it to the folks who actually have a stake in that game. But for national elections, we all have that stake. So South Dakota can be a little tricky. You may or may not be able to register to vote. Second, if you're like me, a person who is still working while living in an RV full-time, it can become very difficult for your employer to register for unemployment insurance taxation to the state of South Dakota if you don't physically live there. South Dakota may or may not make it difficult for your employer to file the taxes for your unemployment insurance, especially if your employer does not have a business presence and a registration in South Dakota. Now, I'm not going to belabor this. A great video from Our Road Less Traveled that I will link in the description tells you in detail how this can negatively affect you. But the Reader's Digest version is Your employer may have to go back to the employer's home state and register your unemployment insurance if South Dakota does not let them. This may trigger a review from your home state if they have an income tax. And if that income tax, because you were in South Dakota, which has no state income tax, hasn't been paid in your employer's home state, you may be hit with a very large bill at the end of the year to cover those income taxes not paid. So keep that in mind. Do your research, watch the video that I will link in the description, and keep this in your back pocket if you're still working. Now, if you are retired, this may not affect you at all and should have no bearing in your decision for registering as a domicile in the state of South Dakota, especially if voting isn't really that important to you and you don't feel like staying in South Dakota for 30 days every year. So in closing, you have 3 states that offer a bunch of wonderful different incentives for full-time RVers. Each one of these states allows for no income tax if you domicile there. In South Dakota, you're going to have the least amount of end-over-end maintenance when it comes to vehicle registrations, insurance, etc. Florida, it's going to be warm all year. It's got a pretty vibrant RV and retirement community, and it also has some of the best healthcare access of these 3 states. Texas kind of sits in the middle of these two. It's not the most expensive or the least expensive. It's not the warmest. It's definitely not the coldest. And it offers a great community and some pretty stable laws supporting full-time RV life. So I hope this has helped. I hope you can do your own research to expand upon what I've offered and make a good decision. Thank you for your time.